welcome to another edition of the 66 to 87 podcast. This is Tom Reed, joined as always by Dave Molinari. A little bit later, we'll be talking with Michael Russo of The Athletic. Going to get into some stuff the Wild will be in next week, but we're also going to talk about things that are going on in Chicago that have made headlines and stuff that's going on in Florida that is certainly making headlines as well. But of course, always the focus, the local team. Sidney Crosby, depending on when you have heard this, may have already played his first game, but there's a lot of expectation that he was going to be back for Saturday. And boy, Dave, just certainly coming in the right amount of time. In watching these last couple games, a 5-1 loss to the defending champions, Tampa Bay Lightning, and a 4-0 loss on Thursday night to Calgary. It reminded me of the saying of the long time ago coach Kevin Constantine, who used to always love to say, water finds its level. And I think with this undermanned group that has done a pretty good job, water has finally started to find its level here offensively.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any question about that. When you look and see that the Penguins have been playing for much of this season without their top three centers, their first line right winger, and they also were missing their first line left winger when the season began. They don't have their number one defenseman, who's also their most skilled offensive defenseman. I mean, there's an awful lot of talent that's not in uniform for this team these days. And yeah, it's finally being reflected on the scoreboard. I mean, they got some surprising production early in the season from guys like Danton Heinen, but all of a sudden the goals have been hard to come by, and that some of the credit for that goes to the teams they've played and the goalies they've faced. Andrei Vasilevsky and Jacob Markstrom were just sensational, for the Lightning and the Flames in the past two games. But, the Penguins, when they're at full strength, if anybody can remember when such a thing exists, they have the talent to beat goalies who are, world-class talents even when those guys are at the top of their games. But when you're sending out the kind of lineup that Pittsburgh has been through the first 7 games of this season, there's only so much that you can reasonably expect. And I think, bobbing along just a bit over 500 as the Penguins are when we're recording this, I think is they would have been reasonably satisfied with that had it been offered to the coaching staff going into the season.
Without question. I was just going to say that. I mean, if they're never going to tell you they would sign up for 3-2-2, but when the guys that they were missing to start the season, and then losing a Carter and a Letang, that type of thing, guys, as the season goes along with the COVID issues, I think Mike Sullivan would be very happy through the first 7 games to be just kind of in the thick of things. And it's early, of course, but what the fear when you looked at that schedule at the beginning and some of the quality teams that they faced was, boy, you just hope that they don't, like 1-6 or something like that. And that's been avoided. They've played pretty well. I thought as we were preparing here and you were writing copious notes, I thought you made a really interesting point. The fact that, the Penguins really, you look at the score 5-1, 4-0, and that certainly doesn't seem to flatter the home team, but they worked hard. But let the listeners hear what your thoughts were and kind of what the Penguins kind of a reversal of fortune in years past.
Well, and I thought this was particularly true in the Tampa Bay game, where the Penguins, in my opinion, were on the receiving end of something they did to so many opponents over the past 15 seasons or so, where the other team would just play its heart out, just give everything it had on every shift, generate good scoring chances, but never quite be able to capitalize on it. And then somebody from the Penguins, a Crosby or a Malkin or a Letang, or a Gensel is, somebody with exceptional talent goes out and scores a goal. And all of that hard work, goes for naught that the other team put in. And, that was, I think, a pretty good synopsis of the Tampa Bay game for the Penguins. The Lightning has a very skilled lineup. And I thought the Penguins, gave a very good accounting of themselves in that game. But Tampa's superior talent was able to overcome that. And yeah, as I say, I'm sure that some people around the league, if they paid attention to the finer points of that game, probably got a chuckle out of seeing the Penguins get what they doled out so many times over the past decade or so.
Yeah, these last two games, especially, again, the other night against Calgary. I mean, how many odd man chances are just grade A chances that they had? They were either hitting the shoulders or the crest, where if Crosby, when he's in form, or a Malkin is in form, those are probably going in the corners, right? They're going in the corners of the nets, or they're finding holes between the pads for goals. And just some of the opportunities, you're having a 2-on-1 or something in the past, doesn't make it across because the player simply isn't skilled enough. You would hope, as a Penguin fan, that's going to change here with an infusion of, obviously getting Crosby back, and we're going to talk about that in 1 second. But Dave, what is it? Do you think that we'll see Jeff Carter sounds like he's getting very close as well?
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. I don't know at this time whether he will be in the lineup on Saturday or not. Just because, he's been away for, about 10 days while in the COVID protocol. And, at this point, we don't have any idea what his conditioning is like, whether he's physically capable of going out and playing without, risking an injury or something like that. But I think if the medical people are okay with him playing, and, assuming Carter feels like he's ready to play, I have to think they will get him into the lineup as quickly as possible. And the same being true with Crosby. I mean, those two guys could make a huge difference for this team.
Yeah, let's just get the obvious. What kind of boost? Not even a boost, but we everyone knows Sidney Crosby's sensational talent. Obviously, future Hall of Famer, one of the top 10 players of all time. But what else does it, maybe as far as the lineup, maybe getting guys, dropping some guys back, maybe some slots where there probably should be, but are having to play up right now? Again, they've done pretty well, but we've seen a couple games have brought.
Yeah, I would think that the first guy to go when Crosby or Carter would come back would be Sam Lafferty, who's right wing on the fourth line. I would guess that Evan Rodriguez, who has been playing first line center, would drop back to that spot. And if you get Crosby and Carter both back, then I would think that Dominic Simone would join Lafferty in the press box, and that Drew O'Connor would move to left wing on that fourth line. But, that's, coaches will make their own evaluations based on what they see on tape and what they've seen from the bench and those sorts of things. But, I mean, that's my perspective right now for what the lineup would look like if and when they get those two guys back.
All right, when we come back on the 66 to 87 podcast, we'll turn that last point around and say who deserves not to come in the line, who needs to stay in the lineup with the way that they've shown out here in the first 6 or 7 games. So stay with us here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting. podcast. Dave, we finished the first segment by talking about some of the guys that may drop out of the lineup. We've seen an extended run by some of this group again that did not include Crosby, Malkin, at times early, Gensel. But who has impressed you? Who of the group of this of some of this undermanned group that just definitely deserves to stay in the lineup? Maybe as high in the lineup, but has played well enough that they have to be on this team going into this next segment of games for you.
Well, I think Drew O'Connor is the obvious answer to that one. I mean, considering that he's just in his second year of pro hockey, I thought that he had some potential, when we saw him a year ago, but he made great strides since his rookie season. He's shown the kind of versatility that Mike Sullivan really likes. You can use him in the middle. You can use him on the wing. I think he's had a very solid overall performance, and he's got 3 goals. He's on a 41 goal pace at the moment. I don't know that we should expect him to keep that up, but I think he's been a very pleasant surprise, and he's a big part of the reason that they've had the success that they have to this point of the season.
Your thoughts on the back end? Just again, they've had some guys come in and out of the lineup. We obviously talked about Letang. There have been some other issues. Who has played maybe okay for you on the back end, or who has not taken their opportunity and run with it?
I mean, the one guy who I think has been a pleasant surprise back there is Marcus Pettersson, just because he had such a tough season for most of 2020, 21. He's been very good to this point. He's been a little more involved offensively than I think we expected. He's been very good in his own end. I certainly like what I've seen from him. John Marino is having a pretty nice bounce back year of his own. The rest of the group, there's the whole dynamic back there gets altered when you don't have Letang. He's the cornerstone of the group, and so when he's not around, it kind of throws some, I don't want to say throws everything into chaos. That's overstating it, but it's quite a disruption trying to make up for that. And John Marino, I think, has done a pretty good job of eating some of those minutes that Letang would consume, especially he's even before Letang was diagnosed with COVID, he was picking up some of Letang's penalty killing duties to try and conserve some energy for Letang. So I certainly think the Penguins have to like what they've seen from him. We've seen some flashes of the offensive ability that Mike Matheson brings. That can certainly be an asset for them, but the unit is never really going to have a chance to perform to its potential until Letang is back as part of it.
You think I would have to think there's going to be a little bit of I think when these guys get back, I think fans the natural feeling was, okay, here we go. But I would have to think it may take a few games, back to Crosby and just getting the line straightened. And, I never put anything past Crosby. He may have a 5-point game in his first game back, but I would think
there is precedent. I remember one of his first games back against the Islanders I believe it was after a lengthy concussion absence. So he had 4 points. I want to say it was 2 goals and 2 assists, but yeah, so. Yeah. So there's almost nothing you could say that would be, out of the out of the realm of possibility with him.
Yeah. Dave, we started this show by talking about the team kind of leveling out a little bit, which isn't really a surprise offensively. But I think, again, getting back to the fact that they're 3-2-2, and Kaspari Kapanen and Jake Gensel have one goal between them, I think even says more about how this group was able to overcome some issues. What are you seeing with those two players? Let's start with Kapanen, because I know a couple of weeks ago I kind of used him as kind of maybe the X factor here early in the season, as a guy that they could really need him to score to kind of get this group across the line until the reinforcements can come back. He's got a couple of assists, I think 4 assists, but the goals have not been there, Dave.
No, and I mean, I agree with you that he had a chance to be a key variable for them going into the season with all of the offensive talent that's sidelined. And you could make a case that he has been, that their record could actually be, better than the acceptable level that it's at right now if he had been scoring. I mean, he's talked about how he's happy with the chances he's gotten, but the scoreboard doesn't give you credit for the chances you get. It reflects the pucks that you put past goaltenders, and through 7 games he has yet to do that. And Gensel, I believe he missed 1 game, but he only has 1 goal, and he's a potential 40 goal guy in this league. You've got to get more production than that out of him, particularly at a time when you're playing without Crosby and Malkin and Carter and Rust and Letang. That's an awful lot of offense to be missing, and Gensel is one of the few guys on the roster who can help to put a dent in what you're missing with those guys.
Just to play devil's advocate for a second, is it easy enough? Is it a convenient enough excuse to say, well, Gensel has been playing with the same line mates for seems like forever now, and he hasn't had Crosby at all this year, and Rust hasn't been around for a whole lot this year either with injuries? Or is it, hey, this guy's expected to find a way to score some goals here even without his first line center?
Well, I mean, I think both points are valid. It does take time to get acclimated to new line mates. There's no question about that. But you like to think that your skilled guys could be able to step up. When you're missing some key personnel, the way the Penguins are, and Gensel is one of those guys with that kind of talent that he could help to fill the void that's been created by those absences, and so far, at least in terms of goal scoring, he hasn't done that.
Yeah. All right. When we come back, we'll be joined by Michael Russo from The Athletic. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about the Wild. They'll be playing the Wild here shortly, but next week sometime. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the situation in Chicago and also in Florida. Mike covered the Panthers for years, so we'll get his input on some of the things that are going on around the league. So stay with us here on the 66 to 87 podcast. Welcome back to the 66 to 87. Being joined by Michael Russo of The Athletic, one of absolutely the best beat writers in the country. We're going to hit Mike up with a lot of questions today. His main responsibility is covering the Minnesota Wild. Of course, they're going to be in later this week to play the Penguins. Also going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Blackhawks, and also Joe Quenneville, quote unquote, stepping down in Florida. Mike covered the Panthers for years. So, Mike, let's start off with the team that you are covering at this point. Pretty good start for the team. What has gone well for this club to get off to a 5-2 start?
Yeah, really good start until last night. They did not play well, and Seattle was by far their worst game of the season. It was just one of those games. They started well, they jumped out to an early lead, and then it was just, I don't know if they thought it was going to be easy, but the Kraken put on their work boots and just outplayed them. And now the Wild do have a COVID issue right now. Zuccarello and Pitlick were missing from the lineup. They have a definite injury issue on the back end. Kulikov and Goligoski didn't play. One kid made his NHL debut, and it was as bad an NHL debut as I've ever seen. And he was just reassigned about a minute ago. And then, Jordy Ben, John Merrill, these are, depth defensemen that were playing huge roles yesterday. So I think that was part of the issue is the Wild couldn't get out of their own zone, couldn't get any sustained pressure in the offensive zone. But overall, look, they're playing well, and this is with, Kirill Kaprizov and Kevin Fiala getting off to really tough starts this year. Kaprizov has 7 assists in 7 games, but he has not been good. Not getting a lot of scoring chances, not nearly as explosive as he was last year, not engaged, not winning a lot of battles. Kevin Fiala, sort of the same thing, probably trying a little too hard. And they've combined 1 goal. And Dean Evason really let him have it last night. This is 4 bad games in a row for Kaprizov. And Fiala has not been that much better. And he basically, in coach speak, said that they're playing too individualistic, too selfish, all that type of stuff. And so, but they've done well because of their depth, guys. They've get goals and points up and down their lineup. They have a really quality blue line. They've been getting good goaltending from Cam Talbot. So we'll see if they can pick it up. Huge test tomorrow night against the Avalanche, where the Wild did not face well here in Denver the last couple of years.
Michael, how much of the Kaprizov struggles in the early part of the season do you attribute to the new contract, or are those completely separate issues?
Yeah, I don't know him well enough to know if that's the type of thing that would create this pressure. I'm sure he's putting an immense amount of pressure on himself right now, having no goals in 7 games. He didn't go more than 6 games without a goal during his Rookie of the Year campaign last year. But you know what? When you have played 55 games in the NHL and you've played against 7 teams in the NHL in mostly non-pressure packed situations in buildings with no fans, and you have a great year, and then you hold the team hostage for $9 million a year up until the eve of training camp, that comes now with scrutiny. You wanted to be paid like a star. You wanted to be treated like a star. Now you better deliver like a star. And he has not been a star. He's not even been anything close to it. And, so now is the time. He's going to have to start playing better, or the scrutiny is just going to continue to build and build and build. And that's just my sense of it. But it's just he's not playing very well. I don't know if it's the pressure getting to him. I don't know if he's hurt, what it is. But he lacks that giddy up that he had last year, where, his edge work, his first couple strides where he's never been he's not like he's not the type of guy that's going to go out and win a race length to length on the ice, but his first couple strides usually allows him to go gain separation on players, and he's just also not going to the areas where he scored a lot of the goals last year. So if I were him, I'd get on YouTube, start looking at his highlights, get some good feelings in his body, and come in ready to put on a show this week.
Michael, we had Ian Cole on over the summer. Obviously, won a couple of cups here. Was with the Wild last year. Really seemed to enjoy himself, and really seemed to enjoy what Dean Evason was laying down. What has been? Is it Evason? What has been the change there? Because they were kind of a feel-good story. The Wild being a feel-good story last season.
Yeah, look, they've made a lot of changes, and the best is yet to come because they have a lot of kids still coming that aren't even on this roster yet. The Marco Rossi's, the Matt Boldy's, the Adam Beckmans, the Murat Huznadinovs. Ian Cole was outstanding last year for the Wild, and it's a huge, huge loss for this team. They could really use him right now with all these injuries that they have on the back end. And trust me, Billy Guerin wanted to bring him back. The problem is that they didn't have a lot of cap space. They went out and tried to sign Nick Foligno. Nick played it like the book, which I completely respect. Nick, the way it is, guys, everybody tampers. The second free agency starts 10 minutes later, multi-million-dollar deals are somehow negotiated and consummated. And Nick Foligno took 3-4 hours, to 5 hours, 6 hours to make up his mind that day. Actually talked to different teams, and by that time, Ian Cole, I think, started to get a little worried. Well, I'm not going to wait on Bill Guerin and the Wild forever, and so he pulled the trigger on the 1-year deal at $2.9 million. Well, then the Wild didn't sign Nick Foligno. They reallocated their funds to the back end, but by then, pretty much everybody was gone, and they started offering contracts to the, Kulikovs of the world, the Johnny Merrills, the Ryan Murrays, and Kulikov and Merrill pulled the trigger first before Ryan Murray. So that's why they're here. But it's a huge loss. But I know that Ian enjoyed his time here and felt like there's a really good vibe going on in that room now. Real good leadership core with guys like Marcus Foligno and Jared Spurgeon and people like that. You guys know Goligoski really well. He's fit in great. So there's a lot to like about this team right now. And even though this is sort of a transition year after the buyouts of Parise and Suter, it sure feels like this team's good enough to make some noise in the Central Division.
You mentioned a team or another team that has a pretty promising future right now is Florida, although the outlook there, got a bit more hazy over the past few days with the resignation of Joel Quenneville. As a guy who spent a lot of years covering the Panthers, how do you assess where that franchise stands now? And how much of a setback do you think it will be to lose a coach who seemed to be bringing out the best in a pretty talented roster?
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think that jury is still out. Like, obviously, you need a great coach there to guide that ship, but that is a good hockey team. I love the things that Bill Zito has done to really flesh that things out, add guys like Reinhardt and Bennett and people like that have gone in there and fit in like a glove. Obviously, Barkov has committed long-term to that franchise now. Andrew Brunette, who knows how long the interim tag is going to be on him. I mean, who knows? Tortorella could be in there by the end of the day, right? So we'll see how long that they take to hire a new coach. But I'm rooting for them, and I hope that this isn't, to me, this was coming in going to be the year of the Florida Panthers. They're ready to make a run. This is an organization that hasn't won a playoff round since the Eastern Conference Final against the Pittsburgh Penguins in 1996. I mean, that is unbelievable. There are 24-year-old people out there that were not born the last time that the Panthers won a playoff round. I mean, that is nuts. And so this seemed to be the year. And then what do? It just almost feels like the organization's curse. What happens is that all of a sudden Quenneville winds up in this type of hot water, and this team that's undefeated right now goes and loses their coach. It's pretty crazy, but the talent is there. The question is, who comes in there to eventually take over. Tortorella is the one that everybody seems to be mentioning. I wonder, though, if Bill Zito is going to say that guys like Bobrovsky and maybe Declare didn't love playing with him in Columbus. That's obviously conjecture, but that's something that you better be careful of, because it sure feels like Bobrovsky is having a bounce-back season right now, and you don't want to do anything to pretty much ruin that. So we'll see what happens here in the next little bit, but I got to think that they're going to have a full-time coach in there sooner than later.
I don't think I'll ever be able to share this story on the 87 podcast again. So I'm going to tell my only Bill Zito story. Bill Zito,
okay.
When Bill Zito was coming up in college hockey, he had a roommate, and they were and his roommate was dating a girl that was working at Foot Locker. And Bill Zito got to know her pretty well, and he was saying, "Well, what is your ambitions?" And she said, "I want to be an actress. I want to be an actor. I believe I have the talent and the skill to be an actor." And Bill said, "You know what? Just keep focusing on going to school. You're working here at Foot Locker right now. Focus on your studies. Don't worry about that kind of stuff." That was Julia Roberts. So Julia Roberts ended up being a big star, and then Zito, they were out on the West Coast one day, and they spot her in his store, and Zito goes to his buddies, he goes, "That's Julia Roberts over there. Watch, I'm going to go up and start talking to her." So that was my only Bill Zito story.
That's hilarious.
The transition here obviously is not easy after telling a Bill Zito story. But Mike, I know you're so plugged in the league. We were just talking about Joel Quenneville. He's out there. Just your thoughts on this story that is coming out of Chicago, and it's for myself, it's hard to believe reading this, and hard to believe how this all went down and the lives that have been impacted by it.
Yeah, I mean, this was a true cover up. I mean, it's amazing to me that after advancing to the Stanley Cup final, that so many people seem to be complicit in the fact, like, we'll just deal with this. We don't want to ruin our chances of winning a Stanley Cup, so we'll just deal with this in 2 or 3 weeks. And reading all these reports from the people that were interviewed in this report, the John McDonoughs, Stan Bowman, they all said that there was agitation in that room. Quenneville was upset that they had to deal with it, didn't want any distractions. And then to find out that they knew about this in May, didn't go to HR about it until 3 or 4 days after they won the Stanley Cup. And then in the end of the year evaluation, that Quenneville wrote all these glowing things about Aldrich. It's just, I'm amazed at that. And these are people that, I hate to say it like this, I used to respect. Like I had a lot of conversations with Stan Bowman just in the last month because the Wild had played them a couple times in the preseason and in the rookie camp. And I've long admired Quenneville as a coach. And it's just, I'm amazed that just you could have such a serious situation, such a disgusting situation, and not address it immediately. And then not only that, then when you start to address it, that you sit there and you write glowing things about them in an evaluation. It's so, the lack of empathy and humanity and integrity and credibility from that organization and those people is just really, really sad. And they have, and then you watch that interview with Kyle Beach the other day with Rick Westhead, and it's one of the most gripping things I've ever seen in my life. And you just wish all of them, and all the people that this guy affected, all the best in the future.
All right, Michael, we're going to end it right there. Thank you so much for taking the time again. Mike Russo from the Athletic, one of the best beat writers out there. Read his stuff. And of course, the Wild will be in town later this week. That's it for us today. For Dave Molinari and for Michael Russo, this is Tom Reed. We'll talk to you next time on the 66 to 87 podcast.